Welcome, I'm Paul, this is Dave. Today I have 12 Glitch in the Matrix and supernatural stories for you. This random deer that broke our universe. Case file number 2562, written by Nainta. A crash without a trace. My husband and I went for a drive up to one of the lakes around here. We weren't speeding or anything, but a deer jumped out in front of us. My husband slammed on the brakes, and we barely missed it as it jumped over the hood of the pickup. All of a sudden, my husband started freaking out. "Oh my god, are you okay? I didn't have time to stop, I couldn't stop." I couldn't figure out what he was going on about. He jumped out of the pickup and started taking pictures of the truck. I got out too, but couldn't figure out what he was taking pictures of. He jumped back in the truck, and we started backtracking. He kept telling me to look in the ditches along the road. I asked what we were looking for. He said we were looking for the deer and he needed to put it out of its misery. I asked him why, because we didn't hit it. He said we did, and pulled out his phone to show me a picture. It was a picture of our truck with the license plate clearly visible. The front end was smashed in, and there was hair and blood in the grill. I asked him what kind of sick joke he was playing, and told him again we didn't hit it. I made him get out of the truck and look. When we got out, there was no damage. I asked him where he got the picture, and he said he just took it a few minutes ago. I asked him to show me his phone, so I could check the date and time of the photo. I couldn't find the photo. I connected his phone to the computer when we got home, and ran data recovery on it, but there weren't any deleted photos. My husband doesn't have the technical skills to fake the photo, and the truck was our only vehicle, so I would have known if it had been in the shop for a previous accident. My husband just kept pacing and saying he knows we did hit the deer. He refused to drive for several months after that, so I know something affected him, truly. So in cases of crashes, I would often just attribute it to quantum immortality, but in this case it's almost like you both occupied different universes at the same time, but were still aware of each other. It's like there was a lag in the transfer of your soul, but it's hard to place because if you still were in the originating universe, where you saw the picture, you were still in the mindset that you didn't hit anything. So even if you did die, why did you feel nothing? You didn't feel like you were injured, you literally felt like nothing was wrong. Now, if you were already in the transferred copy, how were you aware of him, the him that did have the picture? It's a jumble. Things are not layered properly in this glitch. The universes just didn't meld correctly. And there's nothing else to say besides that. It was just a jumble. Case file number 2563, written by No One Shock, 3D Cat. When the Warrior Met the Whisper. A while ago, 1 month and a half-ish, I used to be alone in my room at night, and I would sometimes feel discomfort while trying to sleep or anything. I am religious, and not at the same time. I'm really invested in religion, and I don't break its rules and I have it as a red line, but at the same time I stopped praying. I was learning to pray, and then the series of events happened for a while, and I wouldn't stay at home and I still didn't memorize everything. So I stopped because I simply wouldn't be at home and I didn't have the sheet on me. I'm Muslim. Anyways, I would feel the major discomfort and sometimes hear stuff. Now, I'm not the type that is a scaredy cat. I usually just get my knife and roam the house searching for the source. My friends call me the warrior. I legit don't care about pain or fear. So, I would roam the house with no luck. Sometimes I'd be facing the wall while laying on the bed. Then I suddenly fear something and turn immediately. Or I would be on the phone and see something off my peripheral vision. This wasn't the first time I experienced stuff like this. I have a lot of stories revolving around paranormal stuff in my house. Apparently only I experience it, but there is a surprise later. I wouldn't be thinking about it for it to just be me imagining it. So that isn't a choice. I would simply be sitting in peace. So this happened to several days, but not successive ones. It would happen every 2 days or so. I would feel that specific feeling. I used to stay up sometimes with the Quran and keep saying stuff that helps in these situations. One night, my mom came and saw me up. I told her the story. She started reading the Quran on me. I fell asleep that second. Fast forward 4 days or so. I dreamed of a certain spirit or jinn or something. I dreamed of a dream inside of a dream inside of a dream. 4 dreams in one. I would wake up in the dream into another dream. Now here is the deal breaker. I saw the spirit. She was extremely tall, white clothes, I don't know if it's skin, long fingers. Skin was rough, just like a very old man, and long fingernails. It hunted me in the dreams, and it would attack me. That made me wake up the next morning disturbed. I don't usually feel legit fear, usually slight anxiety, but that struck me with a really severe feeling of horror that made me a fright to a level I never experienced before. After the dream, the feeling vanished for a while, and only happened once or twice in which she didn't intervene in my dreams, or didn't do something I could see in real life, unlike before the dreams. On September 2nd, the day before I traveled, I was visiting my driving instructor. She is a very good family friend, and she even taught my mom back in the day. And my mom and sister were there. While we were chatting and stuff, my sister said by accident that she had a nightmare. She was talking about not having proper sleep schedule. Out of curiosity, I like this stuff, so I asked her what she did dream. She told me she saw a jinn called Alexa. I looked at my mom and told her to describe her to me. Oh, and here it goes. She described the same thing that I saw, literally with the same details and same stuff, accurately. I was shocked in disbelief. I looked at my mom. I told her, "What did I tell you a few days ago?" She was shocked. My mom doesn't believe in this stuff. She usually disregards him as a human mind making visions. I traveled the next day. I haven't experienced anything until yesterday. I currently work at a gas station, so yesterday at 11:45 p.m., I had closed 10 to 20 minutes prior, 11:30. I was in a good mood. Had music blasting for the past 2 hours or so, while doing the usual schedule. I was counting the money, then I felt something behind me. I looked very fast to the direction I thought I saw something. Literally same awareness feeling I had before I traveled. I looked at the cameras and couldn't see anything. I got my keys, at least I can stab, and went around the aisles to check if there are anything. Nope, nothing again. I finished counting the money, I made the tasks, and left. I still haven't felt anything at home yet. Well, the keyword might be yet. Keep a vigilant lookout. This jinn sounds, well, maybe not threatening, but disturbing. Case file number 2564, written by Quador, Spiderweb Logic. I was on vacation with my family, and our vacation home was at the border of a forest. We all enjoy nature and walking, so it was great. After we were already there a few days, I got bored in the afternoon, and decided to take a short stroll by myself. Since we've already walked through the forest a few times, and there were also a reasonable amount of signs indicating the walking routes, I had already planned a path to walk in my head that we had walked on earlier days, so I just started walking. It was a pretty sunny day, and although a forest is of course darker than an open plain, it was clear enough to see quite a distance. There were also some other people and families enjoying the nice weather on some parallel or side paths. When I started from our vacation home, a woman was walking in front of me. She was slightly taller than me, which isn't too surprising since I'm a pretty short guy, 5'6", 168 meters. So I was walking for about 10 minutes already, and she was still in front of me, apparently taking the same route I had planned to take thus far, at the point we were at, a narrower path. Then I walked straight into a spiderweb with my head. Don't you hate it when that happens? So I tried to remove it from my hair, mouth, and cheeks. While doing so, after no more than a few seconds, I froze and felt a shiver go down my spine, realizing that the obviously taller woman in front of me, walking the same path, should have broken the spiderweb. So I look in front of me, where I last saw her just a moment ago, after she had walked in front of me for the past 10 minutes, and no one was there. She was gone. And the weirdest part, there wasn't any tree thick enough to hide behind when we were at that point, just some thin trees and some small bushes. I just stood there dumbfounded, searching all around me for her. I even looked up in the trees above me. I finished the walk I had planned, but I must admit, I did walk a bit faster and didn't sleep so well that night. Can you imagine if it was just a prank and she was just hiding in the trees above you? That would have been funny. Probably equally terrifying though. Imagine she jumps down. Oh boy. She has become the spider. Case file number 2565, written by Nicest Butt Ever. A Side of Wisdom with my shift. I used to be a server at this diner. I was going through a really rough break with someone who I was fully invested in at the time, and was just going through some really tough times. I worked just as normally as I would any other day, as I have a good way of keeping my home life separate from my work. My coworker and I were the last two servers closing on a really slow night a couple hours before closing. A really old man came in the restaurant holding a book, and it just so happens to be my turn to be sat. So I greeted him and escorted him to a booth in my section. I asked him what he would like to drink, and he didn't respond. He just looked at me and smiled. It was a really warm and comforting smile. I told him I was in no rush and to take his time. A couple minutes go by and I noticed he wasn't looking at the menu, but was looking through what appeared to be his photo album. I approached him again and asked him if he was ready. He looked at me again with the same warm smile and asked me to sit with him. Immediately I got goosebumps and got an overwhelming urge to just cry. I'm actually getting chills just thinking about it. He made me feel something so odd that I couldn't resist, and I sat down across from him. I asked him how he was doing that night, and he kept that same smile on his face, but started tearing up, looking at his photo album. Then he just ever so calmly said something along the lines of, "You're going to get past this." I asked him, "Excuse me?" And he started explaining to me how his beautiful wife of 40 years died 2 days prior to walking into my restaurant that night. Then he reached his hands across the table to grab my hand and assured me that whoever it was that hurt me is a part of my past. And he told me that I will find someone to love me, take care of me when I grow sick, to shampoo when we bathe together, and who I will never question his devotion to me. All things that I had told my ex that I needed, word for word. The conversation was so endearing and tender and genuine, and the most warm conversation I have ever had. He was almost reciting things that I would tell my ex that I would need from him, and the man went into detail and told me I will find someone to do those things for me. The conversation ended about an hour and a half later, and him and I were both crying, and we had shared a banana split. He paid and told me that I should go to the beach and watch him play guitar, because he is out there all the time playing. I agreed and he left. A few seconds go by, and I realize he never told me which beach. So I run outside to the parking lot, and he is nowhere to be seen. The only cars in the parking lot were mine, my coworkers, the cooks, and the dishwashers. It all happened so fast. I've never seen that man again in my life. I think about him often, and every time I think about him, I get that same overwhelming urge to cry and just chills all over my body. Also, the photo album was filled with old pictures of him and his late wife when they were about my age, 24. He showed me a particular picture focused on his wife. He was holding her face and you could see he was smiling and her eye had a sparkle in it. You could see they were infatuated with one another. He pointed to her eye and told me to never settle for a man who doesn't give me that same sparkle. It was a beautiful experience. It really does sound like it was. I wonder, was it just instinctual from him, or did he really know more than he let on? How did he know you were going through a rough patch? I mean, maybe it was written on your face, that's possible. Maybe you separate your personal life and work mentally in your actions, but it still could be written on your face, that we can't always control that if we're distraught and just sad. But how he got away so quickly? Just vanished in the parking lot? Different universe, or was it a spirit? Was he dead too? I don't know, but he clearly told you what you needed to hear. Case file number 2566, written by Anonymous. Strawgate at 2 a.m. around 4 years ago, my roommate and I went to Taco Bell at around 2 a.m. And after we ordered, we checked the bag to account for all the food and our straws. We then took our straws out and put them in our drinks. As we parked the car at the apartment, I noticed my straw was no longer in my drink. I searched the car for like 10 minutes, but to no avail, so I gave up and went inside with him. When we walked in, I set the bag on the counter, went to wash my hands, and then lifted a towel and found a Taco Bell straw underneath it, with a little residue on the inside as if it were used. I know my roommate wasn't pranking me, because he walked in behind me, and there was no way he could have planted it there. We had a lot of friends over during that time, so I asked each of them if they remember getting Taco Bell recently, and they said no. I went back and searched the car some more and never found it, nor was it inside the bag or trash. Retraced my steps and everything. The last sip I took was seconds before we parked, and I was holding the drink the whole time. Would have noticed if he grabbed it and threw it outside. It somehow went from being in my cup to being in the house. He also said that it was crazy and unexplainable. Chalked it up to sometimes things happen that don't make sense. I'm convinced I teleported a Taco Bell straw using psychic powers. Well, I don't know if it was your power, but yeah, sometimes things don't make sense. Not on the surface. Case file number 2567, written by Dole Librarian, 4049. Dad vs. Door, the Invisibility Paradox of 96. Spontaneous human invisibility happened to my dad, only he never knew it. To start, my dad was always obsessed with closing the doors at night to not let the bugs in, Louisiana. This is important to the story. If we went outside, we had to do it very fast or he would yell. One night in 1996, I was going out in New Orleans. It was Halloween night, so I was dressed as the Grim Reaper. Before I went upstairs to do my makeup, I told my dad, "I'll be down in 20 minutes. As I was walking down the stairs 20 minutes later, I noticed the front door was wide open at night. What the hell? Trust me, this was a big deal. I looked outside and called for him. I looked where my dad always sits, the TV was on, and his cigarette burning all the way down to the ashtray next to where he sits. He never leaves his cigarette. I decided to wait. I sat on the couch in full makeup and black robe, waiting 30 minutes for him to show up. I was watching his cigarette burn all the way down. All this time, the front door would have been wide open had I not closed it. Finally, I locked up the house and drove off to meet up with my friends. The next morning, I asked him, "Dad, where did you go last night? You left the front door wide open." He said angrily, "As if I would ever leave the front door open. I was here waiting for you to show me your costume, but you just disappeared. You were temporarily separated by a different partition of the same server." There was another case where someone went invisible, so-called invisible, often in his life, and it's just speculation, but I think it's just different partitions of the same server. You can fully transition servers via quantum immortality most of the time, but if you're still stuck in the same server, or stuck, you're just in the same server, it's just a partition issue. Case file number 2568, written by Scarp Mady. Decked out by the Multiverse. Last year, I bought a 23-foot motorboat. If you've ever owned a boat, you know it's a lot of work, especially after winter, to get everything cleaned, inspected, and ready for the putting of the boat back in the water. Earlier this spring, I spent 2 full days at the boatyard doing just that. I took down the winter pressing cover, polished the hull, did some minor engine maintenance, and carefully inspected everything to plan my to-do list for the season. One issue jumped out right away, and it got me seriously concerned. The teak decking needed attention. As is common on boats, my decking is made of teak slats with black Sikaflex rubber between each seam. What I saw wasn't just wear and tear, it was obvious and very visible. Several strings had come loose and were hanging out of their seams. The rubbery strings of Sikaflex weren't just loose in their seams, they were literally hanging out of the seams like spaghetti. Not just on one part of the boat, but both on the foredeck and the bathing platform at the stern. I remember staring at it, poking at it, and thinking, I really need to fix this before any water gets underneath the teak. I looked at it from multiple angles on several occasions, both days I was there, and mentally added it to my growing list of projects. I knew this wasn't something to put off. If water got underneath, it could eventually lead to the entire deck needing to be replaced, which would be a huge and expensive job. So over the following weeks, I did my homework. I read do-it-yourself guides, watched videos, and researched the best ways to fix the seams properly. I went ahead and bought the materials, marine tape, a caulk gun, Sikaflex scrapers, all of it. Probably about $100 total. I was ready. Last weekend, I went back out to the boat, fully expecting to spend a chunk of the day redoing the Sikaflex seams. I started on the foredeck. I crouched down, ready to assess the damage again, and everything looked fine. Not, someone's patched this up fine. It looked like it had never needed repairs in the first place. The seams were uniform, neat, sealed. No sign of any hanging rubber. I was confused but thought maybe I'd misremembered which part of the boat had the issue, so I walked back to the bathing platform, expecting that to be where the loose seams were. Same thing. Perfectly intact, Sikaflex. No visible gaps. No dangling spaghetti-like strings. I crouched down again and examined the seams up close, trying to find cracks or any signs that something had shifted or resealed itself, but there was nothing. No signs of repair, no residue, no unevenness. Nothing to suggest that Sikaflex had ever been pulled out or disturbed. And just to be clear, this wasn't a case of me confusing new damage with old wear. What I had originally seen was unmistakable. Those strings of Sikaflex were literally hanging out completely out of their seams, and I checked them multiple times over those 2 days. I stood there for a while, just scratching my head, trying to make any sense of it. No one else had access to the boat. I didn't hire anyone to fix it. I didn't even tell anyone it needed fixing. It's not like the loose strings could just fall perfectly back into place and rebond themselves, especially without a single crack or seam showing it ever happened. It's like the issue just never existed, as if I slipped into a slightly different version of reality where my deck was always fine. It honestly felt like reality corrected itself, or I stepped sideways into another timeline where my deck never had a problem in the first place. Well, as glitches go, this is way up there with a positive one. Saved you a lot of work. Nice. Case file number 2569, written by Sam32789. The Bank, the Bar, and the Backyard Stranger. Today, I went to pick up my daughter from school and bring her to her father's house. On the way there, I knew I needed to go to the bank after I dropped her off. She asked if we could get coffee before I dropped her off, and then the errand of going to the bank skipped my mind, and after I dropped her off, I went home. Within 5 minutes of me being home, I remembered, oh crap, I need to go to the bank to withdraw money to pay rent. So I grabbed my keys and purse, leave the home again to go to the bank. As I walked up to the teller with my withdrawal slip, she's looking at me with a very confused look. And then when I hand her the slip and my ID, she almost jumped back. And her face was even more confused looking. She glanced at me, and then my ID, and then back at me. I was almost thinking she didn't think my ID looked like me. And she said, I'm so sorry, but weren't you just here for this transaction? And I laughed and said, no, I certainly wasn't, I just got here. She processed the withdrawal, all the while it seemed like she thought I was fricking with her. Like one of those videos you see on the internet with identical twins. I do not have a twin. Should I ask to see security footage? Do you think they'll show me or think I'm crazy? If I had gone at the time I'd planned to go, and had not forgotten, I would have in fact just been there. And even weirder, later in the day while working my bartending job, a woman asked me if I lived in the city I live in, and said I swear I saw you gardening earlier. I always see you in your garden. I don't live in her neighborhood. What's going on? Well, you may have an actual lookalike, a doppelganger. Maybe just normal, a genetic variation, or from a different universe, copies porting over. Case file number 2570, written by Kiwi Fruit Fan. Frozen dinners, paper towels, and a reality shift. My son and I were in the checkout line after grocery shopping. The lines were kind of long, not too bad, but there was a bit of a wait. The customer in front of us was a tall black guy, and in his cart he had like 3 packs of paper towels and a few frozen dinners. It reminded me that I needed paper towels. I left my son in line and went to grab paper towels. Never do that. It took maybe 35 seconds, but by the time I came back, my son was starting to put our items on the conveyor belt. And the guy who was in front of us, his items were being scanned by the cashier. Only now the guy was a really tall, white guy. Like short blonde hair, blue-eyed white guy. And he had on the same outfit the black guy was wearing. And all the groceries were the same as his basket that I had seen earlier. I just thought I was going crazy. But in the car I said to my son, "Did you notice the guy in line in front of us?" I was going to say I could have sworn it was a black guy. But my son said, "Yes, and I'm tripping because I legit swear it was a black guy too, but then he somehow turned into a white guy." He said this before I could even finish my sentence. Both the white and black guy were very tall, much taller than anyone else in line, so you would definitely notice if 2 super tall men dressed alike would be in line together. Like if maybe they were both there the entire time. I don't know, it was just weird. Also, the fact that we both experienced the same possible glitch. Always good to have a witness. But just to say, for the parents out there, I don't know, maybe it never happened to you, so you're doing it to your kid, but never leave your kid at the checkout line with no money, and it's just his turn is coming up, and he's loading everything up, but he has no money, and his mom's not there. Because I don't know for anyone else, but that happened to me all the time, and it was the most stressful 5 minutes of my life as a child, growing up. That dreaded checkout line with the cashier just staring at you like, "It's okay, I have a parent, someone's coming." Oh my goodness. Case file number 2571, written by Old Jeweler 4521, Rust, Ruins, and Razorbacks. Me, my friend, and his brother were out on his dad's 40-acre farm. It had tons of woods near the back where they stored equipment, and we all liked to roam through the forest during the day. There would often be strange occurrences back there, bizarre plants, unexplainable sounds, and I kid you not, an old man herding goats that looked like he was right out from medieval times. These woods were accessed by a really long dirt driveway that turned into a sort of cul-de-sac. In the center of this cul-de-sac was a bunch of scrap metal. Around the cul-de-sac were some high bushes and some more metal until it all turned just straight up woods. Just beyond the high bushes and into the trees was an abandoned trailer home, used by a previous employee of the farm. It was all smashed out and overgrown, but we wanted to clean it up and turn it into a cool hangout spot. We've been in there before, and my friend would always complain about seeing strange things like dancing shadows in the bedroom, even though this guy doesn't really believe in that sort of thing. Anyways, we go in there with tools and clean it out, and my friend and his brother share stories of how drifters often filter through these woods here, and how we might have visitors. We laughed about it, but then all just got really silent. I could read the room and tell that we were all hit with sudden fear, but we didn't exactly know what we were scared of. I was vocal about our fear, and we all agreed to leave, sort of rushing out. We rounded the trailer, still surrounded by woods, but we could see the edge of the trees only like 20 feet away from us as we walked alongside the trailer. My friend said he forgot a machete in the trailer, so he went back, while me and his brother walked out and leaned up against my car in the cul-de-sac. We just stared back into the woods, waiting for my friend while chatting, until we heard a low grunt in the woods, followed by my friend screaming and shouting, saying stuff like, "Are you guys freaking with me? I hope that was you guys." He came out, very pale, out of breath, holding the machete alongside some other tools. We asked him what was wrong. "I heard a fucking pig grunting," he shouted. Shivers went up my spine, and recalling this detail still makes that shiver go up my spine even to this day. We told him it wasn't possible for us to do that. He further explained that as he walked out, he heard rustling from behind in the leaves, and a really loud pig grunt. For clarification, this farm we are on is not a pig farm. It's a fishery farm, where fish and shellfish are kept in large outdoor tanks. We were all scared, but being late teenagers, we were compelled to go back in and find this thing. We gathered our knives and machetes and whatever other weapons we had on us and went back to the trail. Just as we began to walk in, we heard long whistling from the woods, exactly like the whistling on the song Dogs by Pink Floyd. We turned back and got in the car and went back to the estate. We like to think what we encountered was a pig man, due to the whistling and heavy crunching in the bushes, but we'll never know. Case file number 2572, written by JTrain10, Rain, Kids, and a Glimpse Through Time. 5 years ago, my school took all of 7th grade on an overnight field trip to Charleston, South Carolina. I had previously lived in the Charleston area for 5 years, so I was very familiar with most of the places we were taking the kids. On the first day, we stopped at a park in the old North Charleston Naval Base, so the kids could eat lunch. It was an overcast day with cloudy skies and sporadic rain. As the kids ate their lunch, I was drawn to what appeared to be an abandoned house sitting at the top of a small hill. I decided to take my group up to the hill to check out the house, since I like abandoned places and all the kids were done eating. The house appeared to be at least 100 years old, and was surrounded by trees covered in Spanish moss. The dreary sky and moss-covered trees really gave the house a haunted look. The house was fenced off, and all of the lower floor doors and windows were boarded up. While I was checking out the house, while also making sure the kids didn't kill each other, I noticed the curtain in one of the second-story windows move. I then saw a hand grab the curtain and pull it to the side. Staring down at me was a woman wearing a dress that appeared to be from the 1900s. One of my students also saw the lady before she quickly disappeared back behind the curtain. I spent that night trying to find any information I could about the property. It turns out the house was the Admiral's quarters back when the base was open, and does have some reported paranormal activity. I will go as far as to say I saw a ghost. Not necessarily, but it seems that way. Did I see something that I cannot seem to logically explain after 5 years? Yep. The house was clearly abandoned, and every way to access it from the bottom floor was boarded up. The fence surrounding the house was at least 8 to 10 feet tall, and in a fairly public area. It just seems highly unlikely it was a person squatting in the house. Case file number 2573, written by Acrobatic Pandas. 9 lives and 1 last goodbye. When I was 5 or so, I went to a pet store and sat down in the room with the kittens. One cat would not leave me alone. I took him home, and over the next 13 years or so, this cat loved me, in ways I don't think I ever fully appreciated as a child. He was amazing. He slept in my bed. He loved me and I loved him. When he got sick, I knew it was over. The vet told us he needed to be put down. He was in pain, and it showed in the litter box. He was in so much pain. I stayed up the entire night leading up to his vet appointment with him. Laid with him on the couch, knowing I was spending his final moments with him, until it was time to take him in. I was in my teens and couldn't bear it. I couldn't go. My mom ended up being the one to hold him for his last moments, and I hated that I wasn't strong enough to be there for him. It pained me for a while. There was a night I drifted off and entered a dream. In the dream, I was walking home, and as I approached the front door, there he was, chilling at the doorstep like he always was. He just stared at me. I remember looking at him thinking, "You're dead." And suddenly everything became incredibly vivid. He just sat there, slowly blinking at me like cats do when they love you, just blinking. I was overcome with this feeling of peace, and then he slowly faded away, never looking away from me, and the dream went back to normal. I do remember the dream continued a bit. I went to play basketball and lost the ball. Then I woke up and started bawling. I didn't know if it was all a dream, but it felt like he came back to let me know it was okay. Even writing this is getting me emotional, remembering how it felt. I've never in my life had a dream like that again. Now the other story, which oddly enough involves a cat too. I lost my grandma in the mid-90s. She died in the hospital due to surgical complications. My uncle, her son, lived a few hours away and would often come to visit. He would sometimes bring this cat with him. A few years prior, he had brought his cat, and my grandma had accidentally let him outside. My grandparents lived on the very edge of town. Behind them was heavy bush and trees. If you walked south through it all for 20 minutes or so, you'd come out in one of the parks in the town. But to the west, there was just trees and bushes, a river, nothing else. We always assumed he got lost in there. My uncle eventually returned home without his cat, and apparently my grandma always felt horrible. The night we had our open casket, the entire family was there, including his son, along with her others who lived 20+ hours away. Everyone came. Everyone sobbed as we stared at her laying in the coffin and then went home. My uncle was the first one back to the house. As he approached the doorstep, there was a black and white cat waiting to be let inside. It was his cat. The next day he took it to the vet, who confirmed that the tattoo within the ear was registered to him and his address. It was absolutely his cat. We're sure someone else had took it in and raised it for a few years, but he was back with my uncle who took him home. The cat lived for quite a while after, at least 6 or 7 more years. We always felt like it was my grandma fixing her mistake. The fact that it happened on the same night as her open casket has always freaked me out. My uncle had returned home countless times over the years and had never seen it once until that night. 2 beautiful stories, but the first one really hit me and reminded me when I used to work in Florida for a Humane Society kennel, and sometimes, not too often, we'd have to put down dogs or cats, animals that just were in pain. And, boy, I could never be in the room where they did that. Even though they weren't my pets, I was just working there, but it's still, something about it really touches inside me. It's like, it's a visceral reaction. It's like, yeah, okay, you're helping them because they're in pain. There's no way to help them to fix it, or it's just too expensive. But still, killing a pet, killing someone that just wants to be loved, they say dogs are too good for us. Now time for the jokes of the day. How do you get a farm girl to marry you? First, a tractor. I dig, you dig, we dig, she dig, he dig, they dig. It's not a beautiful poem, but it's very deep. My girlfriend was looking at buying a pear tree, and she said they can grow 18-20 feet. I said I'd prefer if it grew pears. Growing feet. Can you imagine a tree that actually did that? God. SCUBA stands for the Self-Contained Underwater Breathing Apparatus, but did you know TUBA is also an acronym for Terrible Underwater Breathing Apparatus? I found a book called How to Solve 50% of Your Problems, so I bought 2 books. Yep, that ought to cover 100%, right? That's how it works. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony, signing off.